All right. So we are live. Thanks everybody for joining us as people start to trickle in here. I know we again I think we were approaching over 40, so they were going to attend this, but I already know we're getting hundreds of people in arrears anyway who are watching this later on. So welcome everybody. I just before I kick it over to Dennis to lead the discussion today, I just want to remind everybody, if you didn't stick around until last episode, we are now a podcast. And for the audio only listeners, that was in quotes because, I mean, what is a podcast these days? But you could search Legal AI Live on podcast apps and you will find past episodes. So if you wanted to listen to past episodes, you could do that on YouTube at Legal AI Live. We're not doing social media stuff because this is like, we're not editing this really. We're taking out ums and ahs for the podcast. Like that's it. We ranked in Australia. We're in the top 150 podcasts for technology on Australia. So good job, everybody. We made it because I'm already getting reached out to by people now that want to help us advertise. Not happening, but we still like to do this. So with that, Dennis, I'll kick it over to you.
I would say a big thank you to our audience in Australia. Australia, I've always felt has been among the like the leading countries in legal tech. So that's great to hear. So I thought we just so this is like an informal monthly, like what the heck? Let's find out what people are doing in AI and talk about it in practical terms. What comes up, sort of like a revolving group of people talking about it with some regulars. And so we'll start just by going around the room. So I'm Dennis Kennedy. I'm the director of the Center for Technology, Law, and Innovation at Michigan State University, among other things. And I like to describe myself as a perpetual beginner student of AI. Let's go to Ben, I guess.
Hello, I'm Ben Shore. I've been in legal tech since the late 1980s. I have spent the last 9 years at Microsoft, and the last 2.5 or so working on Copilot full-time. I am not yet allowed to tell you where I'm about to be, but there will be an announcement coming very soon. So my job title and company are about to change. So
that's a great tune in next month. So for everybody, so tune in next month.
And
for
then
the three people who care, yes, please tune in next month to hear where I'll be. Hi, Mom. And
Greg.
So Greg Kuchansky, I'm the Vice President of Thought Leadership at the American Arbitration Association, and that means I help run our internal think tank, and one of our focus areas is AI in alternative dispute resolution. So I talk a lot about what we're building in that area, and I also get involved in policy making internally and actually build some of the tools that we're rolling out as well.
Right,
Cool.
Matthew.
I'm Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney. I actually have another real podcast called Law Subscribed, where I interview people like Ben and Dennis have been on the show, and Greg, we'll have to have you on at some point, where we talk about how technology is changing the way legal services are offered with a focus on the business model of law. And so that's where, and I have a subscription-based law firm, Subscription Attorney LLC. So I'm a private practice attorney leveraging these tools in my practice, in addition to in my life. So with that, I'll give it back to Dennis to take things on a discussion.
Yeah, so I like to start out this podcast same way I start out my AI and law classes, and I teach two of those at Michigan State with something I call "What Did I Try in AI?" Because everybody talks about theory, and I'm just really interested in what people are doing hands-on that they think is cool. So I learned today that something that I've been doing for a while, some people think is a pretty cool idea. And I've also made it one of my summer projects, and that's using AI to analyze my prompts and improve them. And so people said in the past that prompt engineering is going to go away. And I sort of am leaning that direction, because if you tell the AI what outcome you want and what you want to do, it can do a really good job of prompting. And it can take the prompt that you put together and to analyze that and make improvements with it. And then the follow-up is you can say, okay, take that prompt and give me sample results on this. And then you can kind of see what it's good at, what it misses, and you make some tweaks to that. So that is sort of using AI prompts to improve prompts is the thing I'm trying lately. How about you, Ben?
yeah, I it's funny. I refer to that as meta prompting, where you're sort of prompting about prompting. And we had a prompt that we often used at Microsoft. We published it too. It's not proprietary or anything. That essentially was you're going to you act as my prompt engineer. I'm going to tell you what my goal is, and you're going to walk me through step by step, crafting the best prompt to accomplish what I want to do. Was essentially what the prompt was. It was a little meatier than that, but that was the essence of it.
Right. Yeah.
It did a really good job, actually. And so I really liked the output of that. The other thing I did a lot with meta prompting is I hear people who say, they tell you in prompting to describe what your ideal output looks like. I'm not sure how to describe it the way, that the AI would describe it. And one of the tips I've given is if you've got an existing document, for example, of your writing style, maybe it's a blog post, a memo, a letter, whatever it is, you can ask the AI, how would you describe the writing style, the voice tone and writing style of this document? And then you'll get keywords from the AI from that. I've used that myself. And then you can use those keywords in the future when you go to draft something. You can say, keep your voice and, keep the voice and tone, these, descriptive words that the AI gave you before, because you now know how the AI describes your writing style, which is kind of cool. As far as stuff I've been trying lately, so there's a couple of things I've been doing. One thing is I'm drafting an article, a blog post that's a sort of a comparison of two different AI products. And so I went to, I forget which AI, I'm using all of them these days. And so I can't remember if this was Gemini or ChatGPT, but I basically told it to look at the websites for both products, to refer to both of those websites. I said, create a table of the features of each product, then evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of each product, then recommend when you might choose one or the other. And then finally, I said, look for opportunities where you might use both. And it created a pretty nice long document with a table, strengths and weaknesses, pretty informative. I need to go through and do a little fact checking, because AI.
Right.
But for the most part, but I was pretty impressed with the output. It seemed pretty thorough, and I was impressed with the format that it came back with. So that was pretty helpful. The other thing I've been trying right now is, and this was more theoretical than anything else, because it struck me. I was listening to I think it was a Lawyerist podcast about sort of mental health and sort of how to deal with when you're struggling or failing, not failing exactly, but when you're dealing with a failure of some sort or struggle. And I'm sort of playing around with the idea of having the AI help you get to the next step, because a lot of times when people are feeling bad or they're depressed, a lot of it is sort of a loss of hope. They don't know what to do next, and they're stressed out. And so I'm sort of playing around with a prompt that would be sort of I'm struggling and sad right now. This is the situation. Suggest 5 things I could do today or this week, like small steps, to move forward. Just to have it brainstorm and sort of get you past that, because we've all been there probably, where you're just sort of in a mental funk because you're just things aren't going your way right now, and it's just hard to think of what can I do positive, like what can I do to move the ball forward. And so maybe having the AI, I'm basically thinking about a prompt that might help let the AI suggest, here are 5 things in your situation currently that you might be able to do today that would be a small step in the right direction to get you moving forward.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. How about you, Greg?
Well, to piggyback on both what you, Dennis, and Ben said, +1 to meta prompting. I have a custom GPT that I've been using for that purpose for quite a long time. And I'll either have it craft a prompt, or if I'm having problems with something, I'll just ask it, why isn't this working? And, fix it. And I think that's an incredibly powerful sort of design framework to use when you're trying to get the most out of an LLM. And also with regard to getting the LLM to write more like us, I've actually developed something that has been very effective. I have these 25 linguistic metrics that I scored against about 20,000 words of my own writing. And those metrics go into my system prompt in ChatGPT, and it's quite remarkable, I guess, how well it is able to mimic my own writing style. In terms of things that I'm doing more recently, I think the thing that I'm most excited about is that we started publishing a newsletter on AI and alternative dispute resolution. And it summarizes articles from the previous week on various topics in that area. And the entire newsletter the summaries are all crafted by AI. So I have a whole workflow that's set up where, I feed in URLs that I've collected through the week. It summarizes each of the articles, it categorizes them, and it saves an enormous amount of time. It's something that I really wouldn't be able to publish. I wouldn't have time to, certainly not on a weekly basis. But because I have this whole system set up, it's working out pretty well. And to be clear, we're very, very transparent about the fact that AI is writing the summaries, and that we're not trying to pass it off as my writing or anything like that.
Something that
cool.
will hopefully become not necessary to do in the near future, Greg, because we'll all be using AI.
How about you, Matthew? What are you up to?
Yeah. So I didn't know that like even like the term of prompting would stick back, or it was like early 2023 when that became sort of the regular nomenclature. But I did back in early 2023 nab the domain to legalpromptengineer.com because I thought like, hey, that would be a good domain to have.
Wow.
And so I got lucky there. I mean, I'm not really doing anything with it. There's like a landing page with like, contact me if you want to learn about prompt engineering. But even still, like I'm sort of with you, Dennis, in I don't know how really necessary it's going to be to necessarily like learn prompt engineering as a skill set, because like one of the reasons I always suggest Perplexity, if you could only pick one AI tool, is because it takes your bad prompt and it makes it better and breaks it down into sequential prompts if you have the paid version. And then you can look at under now what they call tasks tab, how they do that. And they were doing this before the deep reasoning models even came out, right? Because like in deep reasoning, you could see like it quote unquote, thinking through, Apple would say it's not reasoning. If you saw that news, that Apple said, no, these things, they don't actually reason. And even if it's just, it is just probability and it's not reasoning, like at a certain point, looks like a duck, quacks like a duck and all that. But I think that using that tool and looking at tasks, the task tab helps you conceptualize how should I be thinking about this when I'm using other tools that don't do that for me. But they should all start doing this for you. And like even like in tools like Paxton, which is the legal AI tool I use, and in Perplexity it does this too. It gives you like 4 or 5 suggested follow-up prompts that are high quality. And I'd say maybe 50% of the time I use one of them. Like it's not always what I'm thinking about, but I might be like, oh yeah, I want to ask a version of that question, and so I could just like do a version of that, and so but like just like artificial intelligence in and of itself is like a marketing buzzword, because like you could describe these tools in a lot of different ways. Like prompt engineering, it's just like a marketing buzzword. And a little bit of a spoiler alert for folks who are going to Legal Geek in Chicago next week, because I'm giving a CLE on this. But what I like to say to help people think about prompting, and this is kind of like what you just posted about, Dennis, with like the context dependent prompting, is I say when you're interacting with these AI tools, pretend that they're the smartest person on the planet. They're your assistant. They work for free, or for 20, like way less than another person, like $20 a month. But they're an entry level worker. This is their first job, and it's their first day on the job. And it's like that every time you start a new conversation with them, right? And if you think about that, then you're going to give it a lot of context. You're going to come up with a really good prompt if you just pretend it's a human, and like all those things apply. And so that's how I'm teaching people how to prompt, because really like it's about being a good communicator. Like that's really all it comes down to.
Yeah. Ethan Mollick says, treat it like a human and tell it what kind of human it is.
Yeah,
right.
That's really good. So I want to talk about Perplexity today because Matthew's convinced me on. Actually, Perplexity convinced me itself, but I as I always recommend, I spent the $20 a month to get the pro version, and this will kind of leverage what Ben was saying as well. I'm starting to say like, why am I even bothering with search engines? Because all I get is like paid stuff that comes up, and SEO optimized stuff. And in Perplexity, there's a couple things. So when Ben was talking about like, oh, compare these things, do a chart and stuff like that, that's stuff that Perplexity can sort of routinely do. And then you can give it this context. I mean, I sometimes hate to say this, but a lot of my Perplexity things, like assume I'm a 67-year-old man who wants to do this, and then with that context, it gives me like closer things and say like, give me like the 5 things that I should consider here. And it does do like the charts and the comparisons. It's really great on, what search engines are terrible at these days, which is like, hey, like I'm going camping. What kind of tent should I buy? Like search engines totally useless for that at this point. You say Perplexity will give you these things and give you like the pros and cons and that sort of thing. Nice chart. And then like you said, Matthew, it does this thing where it gives you like 4 or 5 different variations of the question. And I think this is useful for a couple of things because you can see how you might have asked it in a different way. So that's one thing. You can also say, let me try it this other way and see if the answer is different. So might I learn something myself about prompting or how this is likely, how I might phrase questions in the future. But I just find it great to say like, oh, I just have like this little research thing, like I want to do, like I have this cut on my arm. What should I do? Perplexity, right? It really, and I don't have to like sift through a bunch of stuff. I have these answers, and then I can say like, oh, is this useful? Is it not? Do I need to do the follow-up? So I don't know, Ben, have you tried Perplexity, or that's still outside your toolkit?
I have a little bit, yes, not as much as I'd like to. I'm starting to use it more, but yeah, I've played with it a little bit. I like it.
I think, Ben, when you were planning that trip and you used ChatGPT, because this is a podcast now, so I'm going to reference past episodes. So go check out last episode, and you'll hear what Ben was talking about. I think if you used Perplexity, you wouldn't have run into those issues. Frankly, that's been my experience with Perplexity.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah,
I also could have asked follow-up questions and had it do a little bit more fact checking. I actually did something yesterday. I used Copilot in Edge quite a bit to summarize an article. Right? So I'll open up an article and I'll ask, one of the first things I usually do is pop open Copilot and just say, summarize this article. Just so I've got like a convenient summary in the sidebar, right? And one of the things I did yesterday was went back to Copilot. After it did the summary, I said, compare the summary to the article and identify any areas that the summary might have gotten wrong, or I forget the exact way I phrased it. But basically, I was basically asking it to check its own work against the article. And it was pretty interesting because it came back and its conclusion was that its summary was mostly correct, but it did highlight a few nuances where it said the summary could have been improved, which I thought was pretty interesting. That it added a little bit more flavor to the summary, to the point where I may start doing that more often, is asking it to, now that you've done a summary, improve your summary.
Yeah, to me, I have this like normal prompt I use at the end of a session where I say, "What might I have missed?" Mm-hmm. And that can really turn up some interesting things. So I will say that that what I found on Perplexity is that it really makes you think about hallucinations because it does hallucinate like a reasonable amount, I would say. So you have to be wary of that. But it helps you think through like what's actually happening, and it keeps you from saying like, oh, okay, this is giving me the answer. You're going like, no, it's giving me something, because you can say like, oh, it recommended this thing. I go to Amazon and that model number and that sort of thing doesn't exist, or it says here's this highly recommended thing. You go like, well, this is on Amazon, but there's only 20 reviews of it. Like that doesn't mean it's the best thing. So I don't know, Greg, how about you on Perplexity? Is that in your toolkit?
I haven't, I'm familiar with it, but I haven't really used it very much. At the AAA, we have an enterprise license for ChatGPT. So that's really my daily driver. And I don't know, I guess I've just gotten used to it. And that's what I typically go to. But I think that notion of outputs being an iterative process is a really helpful one in a lot of contexts. For instance, if you're building something with the API and building an agentic framework, you can have a critic agent in there that's going to look at the output of another agent and make sure it's good before it'll pass it on to some other tool, and it'll tell the other agent go back to the drawing board perhaps multiple times. And that's a really common design pattern, and it does lead to improved outputs.
Dennis, are you, that made me think of Greg. Dennis, are you using the pro version of Perplexity?
Yeah, I believe so. I know like the naming conventions on all this stuff is really weird, but
Well, the paid version, because, and I ask because I know you do love to use ChatGPT, and you can use several of the ChatGPT models, the OpenAI models, in Perplexity. If you're paying, you could choose Claude, you could choose OpenAI, you could choose multiple models. So I was wondering if you've dabbled with that at all.
I'm just a simple country lawyer, right? It's like I don't, I haven't thought about that. I mean, I think I'm in the process of kind of pulling everything into Google Notebook and into in a lot of ways, the Gemini world. Part of that is that. So I'm a little bit down on ChatGPT these days because they're making it right now in like the last few weeks, it's really hard to pull stuff out of there. Like they've made it really difficult for you to take your stuff and say like, oh, I'm going to take this stuff. I'd like to take this whole session, throw it into a Word document or a Google Doc. It's really difficult to do that now. And so I feel like it's it's like the Venus flytrap, approach to software. This kind of lured me in there, but I'm really liking it. Like I said, it's totally as a search engine replacement. But with if you use it enough, you will definitely see hallucinations. Which I think is really interesting because a lot of people are going like, oh, I want something that just gives me the answer. And I'm like, yeah, it's not really what we're doing here.
Yeah, and Greg, and the reason I asked Dennis that, Greg, is you can, if you're used to ChatGPT because you have that model, if you wanted to get the pro version, you get 30 days free. I think they still might give that away. You could pick, like I'm looking at it right now. There's like a little like microchip button in like below the search, and that lets you pick the model, and they let you pick GPT 4.1. So that's the OpenAI version that's available to pro users. And what I do is I actually don't use Perplexity at all, like I might use Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude. I only use it instead of searching on Google. Like that's like the way that I'm using it, right? Like I try to find a purpose-built tool and just use that tool for like the purpose it was built, rather than trying to find like a generalist tool. Like when I was practicing at other law firms before I had my own firm, I thought I wanted an all-in-one solution. Mm-hmm. And then I found out all-in-one solutions are not good at anything.
Jack of all trades, master of none. Yeah.
Right. And sometimes you might want that, right? Sometimes you might want that. But like for practice management, like I found like for my law firm, like I do a CLE on tech stack for Modern Virtual Law Firm. I have 82 tech solutions. Now some of them are bundled, right? Because Google Workspace has like 20 tools. But like I prefer best of breed. And that's just the way that I like to use technology as well. So that's my preference. So that's why I don't use Perplexity for other things. And now they released this, this labs thing, and Google Gemini has Canvas, which is like similar. So like they're all trying to like, they're all like the product development's all kind of coming together a little bit. And I don't actually like that. I want hyper specialized tools is what my preference has been.
Yeah, and then you're trying to decide what matters to you. And so the one thing I would say is when I've never really liked AIs that connect to the internet in real time, because I just think you get a lot messier results, a lot less reliable results. And so as the big AI tools have allowed you like the deep research, these other connections to go out and do things. The trade-off I see and why I like Perplexity is they're so darn slow. And Perplexity is fast on the searches. And I almost wish like they had the tool set and they go like fast, faster, fastest, simple things, those, and sometimes they do that. And then a lot of these new tools are really designed, I think, for coders. And, you get in there and you go like, wait, I'm in, like ChatGPT 4.5 and I ask this question and like 5 minutes later, I'm still waiting on it to keep, get done thinking. I'm like, look, this is a simple question. Like this, like, are you just is there something happening there? Or are you just slowing down the response? So I think that you're thinking. So I think I like Perplexity, but it's sort of, we've been kind of talking around this idea, but there's this great quote out there, and I forget the guy, but it's a photographer who said the best camera for you to have is the one in your hands. And so there's part of me that says tools are okay. It's like whatever one you're comfortable in, it's the prompting that matters. And so um, I'd like to test my thesis there with what other people think. Or is it more you're sort of feeling that you get more from the prompts, or that you're going to the tools? Are we still everybody moving around in tools? I don't know. It looks like Greg, you have something on that.
So, and focusing again on ChatGPT, just because it's what I use most of the time, you do have a choice of many different models there. And some of the reasoning models, like the new O4 Mini and O4 Mini High, they're really, really fast. And so there are times where I just want to ask a simple question, or I want to do some simple data manipulation, and I don't want to sit there and wait, and I don't need deep reasoning, and I'll just, use those models, and it's just a quick toggle. So I think there's a world in which you have multiple cameras in your hands, and you can just lift up the one that you want to use at any given moment.
That ends part 1 of this month's Legal AI Live. Make sure to subscribe to the new Legal AI Live podcast at www.legalailive.com to make sure that you don't miss part 2.